So you have a business and you have multitude of customers. Have you ever thought about making a community out of your customers, not just with you, but a community with them and each other? It's probably hard in some businesses for sure, but in others, I think it's not hard at all. And we're going to have a guest today who has really made an art form out of creating this really interesting community, not only in his business with his customers, so between his customers and him, but the customers and each other and him at a level I've never seen. So don't go anywhere. Tune up the volume and listen in.
Welcome to the Value Bridge podcast by Aegis 360 Consulting. Our goal is to connect visionary leaders with down-to-earth insights to bridge the gap between leadership, culture, and strategy. While we learn, we will laugh and offer a roadmap for navigating the complex world of business. Enjoy and learn with guests that have been there and done that in uncovering strategies, triumphs, and challenges.
So my guest today is my personal trainer. I guess that's the official term, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the business, right?
Right. That's right.
Yeah. Jason Leenaarts from RevFit, Revolution Fitness in Stowe, Ohio, where I've been going for, we discovered just the other day, about 6 years.
Yeah.
I've been giving you rations of shit for about 6 years now.
I give it back.
And you do.
Lovingly.
Lovingly and extremely well, I might add. So before we get into the meat of our topic, I just always like to ask a few questions. You're a musician as well as a personal trainer. What instruments do you play? How long have you been doing it? Give us a quick little background on that.
Sure. In 2024 and probably over the last couple of years, I think I start referring to myself more as a recovering musician. I don't do it like I used to. In fact, I probably don't pick up my guitar as much as I would like. But I was in bands for the better part of 15 years.
Wow.
Really thought that I was going to just kind of take over the world with a guitar and a microphone. And that's not the way that went because I found that my the type of life that I wanted was not really in alignment with the kind of money that you make when you're playing shows on the weekend, that kind of thing. So it became more of a hobby than anything else, but wrote songs for a long time in front of bands and was in bands with just fantastic musicians. And yeah, so now music is just something that I'm super passionate about.
Right.
I just don't perform it so much anymore.
Yeah. Okay. And you've lived elsewhere in the world.
I was
grown up.
Yeah, born in Tennessee, but my father, before he passed away, was for all of my life, he was a Goodyear employee, and we were transferred all over, much like a military family would be. So we lived in several states, one other country, and so yeah. And then
what country did you live in?
In Brazil.
In Brazil. Did you pick up Portuguese while you were down there?
Just a little bit. Yeah. And I was there for my freshman and sophomore year of high school.
Oh, okay.
Started high school there and then came back to America to finish high school. And so, yeah. So
you went from bands to owning rental properties to being, and maybe some in between I'm not aware of, but then you've had RevFit for how many years now? 11, 12?
We celebrated 15 years. 15 years. This year.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did you go from, banging out a guitar and some rock music to what was that journey? I mean, how did we get here?
Yeah, I hope I can say this quickly, but it's probably going to be a little bit of a lengthy response. So during the time that I was in bands, I always had a job. So I was working in retail for many years.
Okay.
And once I got out of high school, I was in management positions. So I was running other people's businesses for many years. And around the time that I was in college, I started to kind of go down something of a wayward path with drugs and drug addiction, but still was able to hold down a job. And it was in this sort of early time of this addiction that I got into fitness somewhat accidentally. It was just one of those things where it was like, I feel like I need to do something to improve my body because I'm doing these things that are obviously not health promoting. I didn't have that vocabulary at the time. But it was one of those things where it's like, I feel like I need to do something beneficial for myself, and lifting weights became that thing. And so around the time that I got out of retail, had some life circumstances that happened. We lost a couple of members of our family. My grandfather and my uncle on my mother's side of the family passed away within about 2 years of each other. They both lived in my hometown in Tennessee. And so when they passed away, my grandmother was left with several pieces of rental property, as you alluded to. And I was like, well, here I am. I'm not working. Just finished up my degree because I did college all backwards. And so I'm I work out all the time. I like working out. I had just gotten certified as a personal trainer because I wasn't really sure that I wanted to sell gym memberships on the side. And I'm not a very handy person.
Okay.
So all the money that I was making from those properties, I was putting right back into the properties. And I thought, okay, I can't keep doing this. It's 2008. The economy has just taken a dive. I really liked fitness because it was the one thing that was, after I got clean, I still had this thing that I was doing that I was really into. And I thought, well, I knew some people that had their own businesses, and I thought, maybe I can do this on my own. So I was in a just particular part of my life where I'm like, I think I'm ready to open up my own business. So with the money from selling off all those properties, I paid off the majority of my debt that I had at the time, used the remainder of the money to buy my equipment and open up my doors in Hudson, Ohio, and started that in spring of 2009. And when I opened up my doors, I didn't know anyone. So I literally just had to go out, essentially just guerrilla marketing and just start meeting people and get people into my door. So that's how it started. And
15 years down the road, I mean, clearly in your business, customers come and go for various reasons, but you've been, you're 100 clients or something, 90 some clients, something like that. I mean, I know that it's somewhat flexible, but that's really saying something. I mean, that's pretty impressive.
It is, and it feels that way, especially if I didn't as a business owner realize how important or impactful it was to be able to do that. 2020 showed me a lot, but I think it showed a lot of people. Like, what are you made of? Because if you're made of what you need to be made out of, you're going to survive this. Might not have known that at the time, and you were with me during that time, so you remember what it was like and how we had to pivot and all those things. But it was, you really start to see how much of your identity is wrapped up in the business that you started when it doesn't work the way that it's supposed to. So,
So that's interesting because for our listeners, I'm going to do my description of an experience at RevFit. It is not, there's not a mirror in the place. I rarely hear screaming or yelling other than inappropriate laughing with one another.
Sure.
But I mean, what I mean by that is, the muscle bound guy screaming to get the weights up and then slamming them on I rarely hear a slamming of a weight. People know each other by first name, which is really the topic I want to bring to this. I've been in other gyms and clubs and whatnot, and I don't know anybody, and everybody's looking sideways at each other. And the one thing that you hear a lot is, I don't want to go to a place like that because my body doesn't look the way it should look, and then their body looks amazing and against whatever standard people are using, right? And so then I feel inappropriate there, or I feel inferior there, and oh, by the way, I'm not made to feel welcome. Or we have a new style out there that is what I call these, I don't know, the Walmart version of, anybody that can come in the door and there's, music blaring at a whole nother level, and if someone's screaming at someone. I've tried, and I shared this early on, I've had a personal trainer that I worked with before, and she was great. I mean, she was absolutely amazing at her job. It wasn't that, but it was one-on-one, and I didn't like it.
Yeah. And
so you do this completely different version where it's what you call semi-private. There's, I don't know if you try to hold to a ratio, and that part doesn't matter to me, but, I come in and there's 3 or 4 other folks in there working out, and you have us doing our workouts, and you work with us individually when you need to. You'll step in and go, Ned, that's not how this exercise goes. You need to do this, you need to do that. But we're all working together, which is interesting. There's a culture there of 2 things: no competition and no guilt.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if that was by design, but it's clearly where you are. And we've talked about this before as well. I can come in there and say, oh shit, my food intake was crap, and you just go, okay, well, how do we adjust that, right? I mean, it's not like, I told you, there's none of that. It's a very different piece. The other thing that's unique, so that it's a culture of no guilt and what was the other one I said?
No competition.
No competition, right? I'm not competing with anybody. And And I'm a very competitive person, and that kind of goes away from me when I'm just like, why am I not competing with Randy, or why am I not competing with, anybody else that's in the gym? And it's like, we're all there for our own reason. That's why. And we're not there to compete with one another to lose more weight or whatever. The other interesting piece that you bring into it is certifications, but also this passion, I will call it, in combining the exercise, whether it's weightlifting or whatever it is, combining the exercise with the nutrition, that these are two things that are not mutually exclusive. In fact, when we make them mutually exclusive, it's actually can be very detrimental to the other one. So I'd like you to just talk a little bit about this culture of no guilt, no competition to start with. Was that by design? Did it just happen? Did you all of a sudden you wake up and go, oh, I've got this, and then run with it? How did that come up?
Yeah, first, I do have to say it's always fascinating to hear someone else's interpretation of what the business is, because I get so lost in it that I tend to forget until somebody tells me this is what the experience is like, through my lens. So what's interesting, and hopefully I can pick up on all the points that you mentioned, because I don't want to miss anything. Yeah. But if I take you back to 2009 when I started the business, and you never saw that location, but there were mirrors everywhere. I had mirrors lined around the room because I thought that's what people wanted. I thought people wanted to see themselves in the mirror. Okay. And it never dawned on me that at that time, people didn't want that, because my initial gym experience was in a place with a lot of mirrors. And I know some of the people that are listening to this are not going to be watching a video. They're going to be listening on a podcast. Sure. So they can't see that I'm built like a 12-year-old track star. I'm 5'9". I'm 140 pounds. I'm a thin dude, and I've always been that way. So for me, when I first got involved in a gym, it was an uncomfortable experience, because I'm walking into this, if memory serves, it was probably a Bally's. I was walking into a Bally's, and I am the smallest adult male in there, in stature and in frame. And it's like, wow, there's no one else in here that looks like me. And I remember how awkward that felt, especially because I didn't really know what I was doing with the exercises. I thought I knew what I was doing, but I was that stereotypical guy that got pinned under the bench press because I didn't know what I was doing, and I overestimated what my body was capable of. And thank God, the first time I got pinned under a bench press, nobody saw it. And if they did, they didn't tell me about it to make me feel bad about it. So I'm very grateful for that. But when I started in that business, that's what it was. There were mirrors everywhere, and it took somebody to say to me, can I go over here? I don't want to see myself in the mirror. Before I was like, oh, I never thought about that. So that was one thing. And then when I moved into my next location, because the where you train now is the third, technically fourth, but the third place that we've been in, third playground. And when I went to the next spot, I had fewer mirrors, but there were still mirrors. And then it's like, finally, because I'm a bit of a slow learner, it was like, oh, maybe what we need is fewer mirrors, just in general. Because the one thing I found over time was that I leaned towards training more women than men. And it's always been that way. I've always had a ratio that's been somewhere around 60 to 70% female versus the difference in male ratio. And that's okay. But it's often the women who don't want to see themselves in the mirror. Can you put me over here? I don't want to see myself do this. Okay, cool. So when we moved into this location, I was like, all right, no, we need one mirror. We put one mirror in front of the dumbbell rack, and that's it. No other mirrors. And that's worked out pretty well. As far as the no competition, no guilt, by nature, I'm not a very competitive person. I'm just not. I wasn't necessarily raised in that environment where, I was around it much. I mean, I played some sports, but I wasn't so passionate about sports that it was like, a win at all costs feeling. And so when I train, even for myself, the only person I'm in competition with is me. And so we do, I would say it's a very low competition environment, because we do have a board for the people that do the deadlift or, trap lift variation, a squat, a bench, where the strongest people that are there, they can compete against one another if they want to. But that's only a percentage of my business. There are some people that I train, and it's not a small percentage, who will never do those lifts. Like physically, they're not able to, or the risk versus reward is so out of balance that it's like, let's just not do those lifts, which means you have to be okay with the fact that you won't be on that board, but guess what? I won't be either. And I'm not going to hold that against you. But then the other part of the community is, part of it is in the name. it's personal training. And there are personal relationships. You will see elements of my personality. I can't hide those things. I'm not a robot. And so what I found over the years, and a lot of it's been through, and it's interesting, we talked about the music at first because I used to write songs. I don't write songs anymore, but I write blogs or blog posts, articles. And I'm very consistent with putting those out each week. And because it gets kind of boring talking about protein and calories and, reps and all that other stuff week after week after week, what I end up talking about is life and the things that I've had to struggle with and the drugs and the other stuff that, make my life what it is, which for some people, they find that really interesting. And some people find it a little bit polarizing. Maybe he overshares, maybe it's TMI, that kind of thing. And so what I've found is that if I continue to put enough of myself into that writing, people will see that they'll go, okay, so here's a guy he's been through some stuff. He's survived some things. That's someone that I can connect with because I feel like he's not going to judge me. He's not going to judge me if I ate something that I quote unquote shouldn't have, which is not the way that I look at food anyway. He's not going to judge me if I didn't make it in for my workout yesterday. He's not going to judge me if I didn't lift the weight. And not only is that my approach, but it's what I try to instill in the coaches that I bring in, like this. That's not how we operate. What was probably to my benefit, and this is only with the benefit of hindsight, is around the time I was starting my business, The Biggest Loser was a very big show on television. And you did have those coaches that jumped up and down and screamed and all that stuff. And some people found that very motivating. That would not have motivated me. So I just wanted something that felt very open, very as fun as we can make it. And I wanted the kind of place, if it was possible to design it, I wanted the kind of place that not only would I want to come there every single day and work 60 plus hours a week doing, but I wanted other people to have fun there too. And I can sit back now and go, wow, my youngest client is 12 years old or 13 years old. My eldest client is 84 years old, and there's a huge span in there. And, we're recording this in 2024, and what's happening in 2024, we're leaning into an election that's a very weird time of year, regardless of what side of the fence that you're on. And I can bring all of these opposing views under the same roof, and we can be nice to each other. Because on social media is where people aren't so nice to each other.
Correct.
And that's such a beautiful thing that it's, they say, find something that you love to do and you'll never work a day in your life.
Right.
I got real lucky that I got to be able to say that. And I know that not everybody has that luxury.
Right.
But that's probably a very long-winded way to answer. Hopefully I touched on everything.
No, you did. And I think it's important the other piece about this that I want to bring back on the no guilt is not only is it no guilt on the floor between each of your customers and between you and your customers. But there's this really interesting, and I don't want to get into the technical side too much today, but it plays into it, right? There's this very interesting way that you approach food. And you have said some things to me that's just like, well, damn, I'm not going to get anything done the rest of the day because I'm maybe thinking about what frickin' Jason said at 5:30 this morning. Thanks a hell of a lot, right? But I interviewed, I don't know, 6 or 7 before somebody said, I had like 3 people say, if you don't go talk to this guy, you're an idiot. Because I was telling people I'm trying to find a place to go. So I finally made an appointment and came in, and it was interesting because one of the things that you said to me that one of your other clients had told me was, I said, well, what diet would you recommend I go on? And you go, I don't do diets. I'm like, excuse me? You're a nutrition guy. How's that work? And as I've grown to understand, it was this whole thing of, look, we're looking at this holistic view of food. We'll talk about food, but it does also, I think, workout, right? And life in general. We're looking at this holistic view, and you may be, eating the wrong stuff and too much on Wednesday, but, you compensated for it or overcompensated on Thursday. But what did you do over the 2 weeks or the week? And, over this larger body of time, we'll get the job done, which I've always found really interesting. And when I was on my first weight loss drive with you before COVID, where I lost 47 or 48 pounds or something, I was sending you videos of food, and we called it, you aptly name it, the Ned Parks you diet, where I would send you videos and I'd say, you donut, right? All these foods that I shouldn't eat. And we had a lot of laughs about it, but it was interesting because on a selective basis, you shared it with others in the gym, and we would have these open conversations. And I now have friends that go to the gym that I would not have had at any other gym. Right. And I'm not throwing stones at the other types of workout places. You know, you go in and you got a guy running up and down a line screaming at you. Hey, if that's what you want, good for you. If you get something out of it, who am I to say, right? It's just not my gig, and it's not the gig of you or your clients. But as a result, you've built this community where when somebody does hit a personal best on the trap bar or the deadlift or the bench or whatever, or you get a picture of them and they've lost weight and you hold up the weights or the numbers or whatever, everybody else cheers.
Yeah.
And I don't see that other places. Was that by design or did that happen by accident? And then you went, like the mirrors, you went, oh, gee, that was cool.
Yeah. So many of the decisions, I'd say, were more reactions to what was going on. I got really engaged with social media, Facebook specifically, probably 8 or 9 years ago. And what started it was I had and still have a gentleman by the name of Richard who had started training with me. And Richard at the time was 75 years old. And Richard was a very capable 75-year-old who could do things that people many years his junior could not do, to the same level. And so it might have been his first or second session. And I took a picture of him doing battle ropes. And I was like, how cool is that? 75-year-old guy is in here just killing it with battle ropes. It just, and it's such an interesting exercise because it's not like you don't get PRs on the battle rope, but it's a cool thing to take a picture of, to see it in action. And I posted it on Facebook, and Richard was kind enough to let me tag him in that picture, which, we could do in a whole other, conversation just about the influence of that kind of thing. Right. But people started talking, and I'm like, oh, that's an interesting way to market my business, is I can just start taking more pictures. Mm-hmm. And so it became, at first, I was just taking pictures of people doing everything, everything from a battle rope to a curl to a press down to a whatever. And then it morphed and evolved into, really trying to capture more of the people, hitting these records, because I really put a lot of value in people that look like your average, everyday, ordinary person that you would just pass by in the mall doing really extraordinary things. That to me was awesome, as opposed to the people that you're like, oh, that person is very muscle bound. Of course they can lift that much weight. That's not surprising. So I wanted the average to look greater than average if all you had was a picture to take a look at. And then with the weight loss, it was just one of those things where around the same time I had a client that came in that said, hey, guess what? I'm down 10 pounds or 11 pounds. Let's take a picture of that. We hold up our fingers and, celebrate. And next thing you know, people are talking about it. And it was a way that for me, and this is somebody who's never needed to lose weight in my life, when I look at a transformation picture of before and after, that doesn't speak to me. I know it speaks to other people, but I'd rather just say this person lost X amount of weight, rather than trying to, for lack of a better term, objectify what's happened with the body, to go, do you see what it used to look like? Do you see what it looks like now? And I don't want to knock anybody's hustle, because I know for some people that is how they sell their services. And that works quite well for them. Sure. It wasn't the approach that I wanted to take. I wanted it to be essentially a softer approach, because on the flip side of it, and you kind of touched on it, is that fat loss is all fine and good while it's happening. But life is inevitably going to happen at some point. And you touched on the fact that, the world went through something catastrophic with COVID in 2020. And that's where you really started to see people's default patterns start to kind of creep back in. And for many people, not only did they start to regain weight that they lost, but it was hard to kind of stop the train once it got started on the tracks to really start to go, okay, so wait a second. Let's get back to what was working before. And for some people, they could do it within a couple of months, after we got out of lockdown. And for some people, it would take them a year and a half before they're finally like,
some have not recovered at all.
Totally, because it was so disruptive. And so it's just one of those things where, again, going back to like the no guilt, I'm not going to make anybody feel bad that the weight crept back up. It's just, hey, we got it off before. Right. When you're ready, and when you're ready is a really big, really big thing to say. Sure. When you're ready, let's revisit the conversation and figure out how to do it again, because I'm probably a little bit smarter than I was back then, which means I might have a few more tools to help you with. And that's a good thing for both of us.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. Well, we're about halfway through, so I want to have a little fun conversation with you. You have an Instagram channel.
I do.
And to say that some of the things you put on there is edgy is polite.
It's true.
And you have said that you've won and lost followers based upon some of your posts.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about the concept of the edgy and what you're doing, and not to just. I know you well enough. You're not doing it just to be outlandish. You're not just an attention getter. There's a message there. I'll bet some of them are edgy to the extreme and funny. They're all hysterical. So talk a little bit about why you're doing that there and the fun that you're having with it. Because sometimes I get a sneak preview and I just shake my head and I go, he's lost his mind.
Sure. And yes, I have. I still haven't found it. But the thing that was interesting about Instagram was that when I first saw it as a platform, I didn't get it. I didn't understand why it worked. I didn't understand why people were paying attention to it. I had all my eggs in one basket with Facebook because what I was doing with Facebook was working really, really well. So I thought, well, I don't really want to learn how Instagram works. I'll just keep cross-posting what I'm doing on Facebook, put it on Instagram, and it should do the same thing. And it didn't, because that's not how they play the game. And so I had to learn a little bit more about what makes people stop on Instagram. And it took a while to kind of understand, oh, this is what draws people in. You only have a few seconds to capture somebody's attention. And so when I started to learn that, I don't mind coming up with content. Creating content is not a hard thing for me to do. Not getting bored with it is a slightly different conversation. So much like we do at RevFit, where conversation can be a little bit colorful and sometimes a little bit spicy, that's something that I wanted to inject into the content as well. So I would hear certain things or I would think certain things and I'm like, I can repurpose this and I can make something a little bit saucy on Instagram and let's just see what happens. And what the mixed blessing of it is you're definitely going to draw in certain people and it has its own automatic filtering process, because if you see it and you're like, and it turns you off, for instance, you're probably not going to be a RevFit client. What's interesting about this is I didn't mind doing this kind of stuff for a long time, a couple of years, where I'm just every day I'm putting something out, and probably a couple times a week I would do something that was a little bit naughty. And I remember having a conversation with my wife, who does not have the sense of humor of a 12-year-old boy like I do. And she made a comment.
Most wives do not.
That's right. That's right. And I think that kind of balances things out. But she said, do you really think that all the stuff that you're putting out there is funny? And I'm like, well, it's funny to me. I think it's hysterical because I'm laughing in the middle of filming it. And she's like, well, I don't know that I necessarily find it funny. And at risk of making my wife sound like a buzzkill, trust me, my wife is the hero of this story. She had said, well, if I were looking for a personal trainer on Instagram, I'm not sure that if I saw it, I would want to go to that gym. And I'm like, okay, but again, we don't have the same sense of humor.
Correct.
And she goes, well, then let me ask you this. If a man were looking for a personal trainer for his wife, would he hire you?
Oh.
And I was like, damn, mic drop,
Right.
And so it gave me pause. And I'm like, okay, well, if I ease up on some of the sexual innuendo type stuff, which a lot of it was,
right.
If I ease up on that, am I still able to put my personality into the post to still get a point across, to still show that, I have a certain line in the sand, I have a certain cognitive bias with the way that I approach things? Can I still put that into the content without necessarily offending somebody? And the thing is, you're always going to offend someone,
sure,
because it's such an unusual form of media that you can't cover all bases in a 20-second post. You just can't. Somebody's going to be left out hanging. And I had a post that came from a very good place, a very loving place, a very helpful place a few weeks ago, and it just got bombarded with people who saw it from a slightly different lens. And I didn't understand why until I really started to read between the lines, and I'm like, oh, I know what I could have done differently. So it just, you see things through a certain lens. That lens isn't always the most effective one to look from. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. there's obviously a lot of conversation out there about cancel culture, and you can't say anything. There's all that going on.
Sure.
I made an offhanded comment teaching a workshop 2 weeks ago.
Sure.
3 weeks ago. And I said something about, I don't even remember what I was talking about now. I said, well, sometimes you just have to correct a whip. Mm-hmm. I probably said it a bazillion times. I've never even thought about it.
Sure.
And I don't know that I would change it because of this, but it certainly has made me think. I had a delightful lady come up afterwards, and she said, look, I don't want to be one of those people. Right. And I couldn't believe she told me this. I mean, I just about fell over. She said, my father beat me with a whip my entire life growing up. Mm-hmm. Oh.
Right.
Now, we can't run around changing everything we say for these one-offs, but we need to be mindful, I think, and that's, I think, where you're going with the mindfulness, which brings me back inside the gym and the fact that, I have Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 5:30 is my normal workout time, and there's a certain group that goes in there, and it's taken on its own culture.
Correct.
And I don't know about the other time slots, but I know that we're pretty risque and completely and totally off the charts, and sometimes so inappropriate that, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that we just were laughing about that.
Right.
But I have, done makeups or, hey, I need to change my schedule. And I've just noticed the culture of each time slot has become very interesting. And I'm very mindful of it because I'm not going to bring the 5:30 culture into 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Thursday, which it's completely different clientele.
Totally different.
And they might look at me like, who are you?
Right.
And so does that somewhat probably, I mean, you don't design that. You don't say, oh, you're prim and proper, you shouldn't come at 5:30, but, or you're a completely off the rails individual, you should not be here at this time. I mean, that kind of just happens in its own right. And it seems like the community very organically takes care of itself.
Yeah, it's a very unique dynamic. And one of the things that I've tried to be very conscious of, and I don't always get it right, but sometimes the music tends to inform the atmosphere. Oh. And not all the time, because there's certainly times where a conversation can go sideways and there's nothing playing yet, especially not when it's the first shift in the morning. Yeah. But we do have to be mindful of who's coming in. There are certain types of music that we can play when certain people are there, certain types of music that we don't. So we do tend to change the station a bit throughout the day. And so we as coaches, the staff of coaches, try to be very mindful, because there have been people that have said, I was in the other day and y'all were playing something that I was kind of offended by that music. Oh, you know what? We as coaches, again, get so lost in what's happening on the training floor that sometimes we just tune it out, and it just becomes background noise. But for someone else, it's not background noise. It's very much, that is the stimulus that they're taking in. So it's the music can often inform it, and
I never thought about that.
Yeah,
I never thought about that.
It's interesting. And then the other part to it too is that the beautiful thing about RevFit is we can all be ourselves. And sometimes the worst part of RevFit is that we are all ourselves. Mm-hmm. And every so often, and I'm very fortunate it doesn't happen often, but every so often something is said, something occurs, and somebody gets offended. Mm-hmm. Now, that offense may be something that person then takes it, internalizes it, and then next thing you know, they're saying, hey, listen, I really appreciate all you did, but I'm not going to be coming back. I won't ever know why. I just know they're not coming back. Mm-hmm. And then there's another type that says, this thing offended me, and I want to bring it to your attention, because I want something to be done about it. Right. And so the risk is that you don't want to referee it to the point where people can't, again, be themselves. But it's also trying to find that delicate balance of, I want you all to be yourselves. We should be in a place where we can talk about just about anything. But that doesn't necessarily mean that everything is open forum for the floor. And that pertains to me as well, from the things that I talk about and all that stuff, because I have to even be mindful, who do I say bad words around, and who do I tend to be a little bit more conservative with, that kind of thing. So, yeah.
I define culture as the unwritten rules and norms of a group of people. And I talk about macro cultures and micro cultures, and you have a really interesting, you're a really interesting example of it, looking at it through my lens as somebody that does organizational work and leadership and whatnot. The macro culture is RevFit. So what's the culture that applies across the spectrum of RevFit? And then the micro culture is each time slot or group. Maybe it's a better. And it's really what we've been talking about. But these are what I call unwritten rules and norms. It's just they sometimes organically happen. Some of it is just driven by the way you want to run the place, right? If on a macro level of the culture there and in the community, if I want somebody screaming in my ear, I'm probably not your client.
Correct.
Or I am your client, but I'm also going to be going to an ear screaming place. And you do have clients that go to multiple places.
I do.
For multiple different types of delivery.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, that's right.
And that's okay with you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Sure,
because I know myself well enough that I will never be a jack of all trades.
Right.
I'm going to do one or two things. I'm going to do them as well as I possibly can. And I'm not going to water it down too much because this is what I do. This is what I do to the best of my ability. And then I try to bring in a staff of coaches that they shore up the things that maybe I'm not quite as good at. And they all kind of have their own little specialties and ways that they look at the human body that inform the way that they train. And so I think that it lends a really nice, atmosphere to what we do. But no, I appreciate that there are people that realize that I can go to RevFit for all of my exercise experience, like what I want out of exercise and community and all that stuff. But I also like something that's more high intensity, where it is louder, more vibrant, things like that. More people are involved.
Maybe getting pushed a little harder.
Yeah, how many calories can I burn in this kind of thing?
Sure.
Or to what we talked about before, a more competitive environment. And I think, for the businesses that do that, that's their bag.
Right.
That's their jam.
Right.
And so I think it says a lot when you can be open enough to be like, that's totally okay. It's totally okay that you go to Orange Theory or boot camp or CrossFit and you do this too. Because I would never want to shut the door on those experiences because they all have value.
Yeah. I think for our listeners out there, Jason, I think the lesson that I want people to pull out of this is that be true to yourself and the culture you're building and the kind of business you're building and what that delivery system looks like. Understanding, and you said it, you can't be a jack of all trades, and nor should you try, because then you're a master of none. That's an old saying.
Yeah.
And then understanding who your ideal client is. Who is my client, right? And for you, I think, tell me if I'm wrong, but at least through my lens, your client is somebody who is not necessarily, you have a few that are in there, bodybuilders that compete. Yeah, you got a couple, but it's certainly not you would never say that's my clientele.
Right.
It is more the person that's looking for this more holistic approach to their health. And conversations take place in there, which I always find fascinating, that for some people might go, I would never have that conversation in public, but for others of us, it's like, I got carried away on donuts and this is my problem and this is my trigger. And you and I, or you and someone will have this really interesting in-depth conversation and the whole room's listening and they both learn from it and also don't care at the same time.
Right.
And sometimes join in the conversation and it's okay. Or, hey, if I need to talk to you, you got an office and we'll go have a conversation in the office about my body, which tends to be pretty intimate for people to talk about.
Yeah, for sure. Right? Yeah.
And what's interesting is you have built this place for about 100 people, and more than that over the years because they come and go, but for about 100 people currently. And everybody's getting what they want, and many people are coming in for different things.
Right.
And I think that's just fascinating. And you've got this wide range of ages. I don't know that Richard would ever go to Orange Theory. I just don't think that would be his gig, and probably not what he should be doing at 80 some years old.
Yeah.
I just don't think that is the right thing. But I guess the point that I want someone who's listening to this that's got a law office or a dentist's office or a car repair or whatever business they happen to manufacture, whatever business they happen to be in, is you've identified your clients and you are very comfortable saying no to not your clients.
Oh, absolutely.
Whether you do it,
yes.
No, you're not my client, or they just organically gravitate away, however that happens.
Right.
You're very okay with that.
Yeah.
And what I find a lot of businesses doing is, oh my God, I lost a client. My world's going to come to an end. Well, your business may be better without that client.
Yeah, and initially when I started the business, I had to take everything that I could.
Of course,
because
you did.
that was the only way that I was going to be able to keep the lights on.
Right.
But I very also quickly learned this is the kind of client that I enjoy working with. This is the kind of client that I believe that I'm good at working with.
Right.
And then other people, because there have been people that, they send me an email or they'll ask questions and they'll say, this is what I'm into. Can you help me? Actually, I'm not your guy. I have somebody that might be able to help with that, but that's really not my stock and trade. So let me get you in touch with this person because I think you're better served to go there. And then everybody leaves happy. Right. Because the one thing that I really don't like doing is I don't like wasting people's money. Because if you're going to put your hard-earned money into that business, I want it to be, mutually beneficial.
Correct.
Not just I wasn't going to try to drag anybody on this call, but I didn't want the Planet Fitness or the box gym approach, which is we want you to pay the money. We'd rather you didn't show up.
Yeah, right.
Because
right.
that's how we keep everything going.
Correct.
Because if all the people that paid showed up, there'd be no space for people to train.
There'd be none.
And in our business, things tend to go better when you show up. So it's just that's the
well,
secret
that's
sauce.
That's an interesting statement because I don't know that I would like to work out when I'm the only one in there.
Yeah.
I mean, it happens sometimes. It's not a big deal. I don't even think about it. But if it was like, oh, this is your slot, nobody else is in here, I'd go, yeah, I'm going somewhere else.
Right. Because that was your prior experience.
Well, it was. Even if I was at one of these larger places and there was 15 personal trainers and each of them is sitting there staring at you, and it's like, can you look at something else for just a minute? I mean, I get what they're doing. I get the job. It's not that I don't understand the technical side of it.
Yeah.
But you have built this really fascinating sense of community between your customers.
Yeah.
And I think that's something else that many businesses ought to do. The accounting firm I use works very hard at that, interestingly enough. They have events that are thank you events to their clients, but they also work very hard at putting the right clients that they think should meet each other in the room together. And they're building a sense of community there.
Smart.
And I think it's brilliant.
Yeah.
And I don't know that it's done enough.
Sure.
And that's the real lesson that I think we get out of you on that. So I'm going to come to a close. I got a couple fun questions for you.
Sure.
What's one bucket list item for you? And let me define bucket list. Mm-hmm. It's that it has nothing to do with business normally, and it's like go to the moon. I mean, it's that level of bucket list. What is the one thing, or maybe the two things that would qualify to be on your bucket list?
Yeah, it's weird because I don't have a huge connection to this place. I really want to go to Switzerland. I don't know why. It's a place that, like, every time I see pictures of it, I'm like, that looks like such a cool place to be. And then what's weird is that I really don't like snow. And every time I see a picture of Switzerland, there's snow. Uh-huh. But there's just something about it that's so breathtaking to look at. Mm-hmm. And I've certainly been to parts of Europe. My father was a Dutch immigrant. So I've been to Europe a few times. I just haven't been to that part of it. And it's like, that's something that it's like, just haven't done it and would love to do it at some point. So yeah, that's an easy one.
That is an easy. That's great.
Yeah.
I love it. What's the one probably most embarrassing thing that's happened to you that you laughed at yourself about?
I feel like these kind of things happen every week. Embarrassing thing. I don't know. I'm not sure. I would say, just because I was just kind of talking about it, we were talking about the content creation thing.
Yeah.
And I take a certain amount of pride in being able to do that because it's me, it's my message, mm-hmm. It's my face, it's my voice, it's whatever. Assuming that's your flavor. And that particular message that really got taken the wrong way, it was embarrassing. And it wasn't so embarrassing that I felt like I needed to take it off, mm-hmm. Because I have that choice as a creator. I could just delete it and go, oh, it's like it never existed. Right. But that's not the way the internet works. The internet works on a premise that is, you could delete it or not, but there's somebody has some screenshots of it somewhere. Right. So for me, it was one of those things that it was somewhat embarrassing to have what I thought was going to be a very helpful post put out there for the people that follow my message, and to have it so misinterpreted, in my opinion, misinterpreted, and in a way that I wasn't. You never want to fall into that position where you're gaslighting people. Like, no, you're wrong. But it really took me some time to like step back and understand for the people that commented on that post, if you didn't like what was being said, what is it about what I said that you didn't like? And then when that conversation started to open up, that's where you really kind of start to see, oh, there's a lot more to this than what your initial reaction was. And so it was embarrassing because my name is attached to it and it's quite public, but it's a learning experience as well. So,
and one more question, but in between there, we're going to put in the show notes, website and so on and so on, and the Instagram. But just for our listeners, maybe in the car, how do they find you on Instagram? That seems to be your big playground now.
Yeah, so I have a pretty easy first name to remember. It is Jason. My last name is far more challenging. It is Dutch. It's very Dutch. There's only about 7 or 8 of us in America, but if you can spell the last name, it is Leenaarts. It's pronounced Leenaarts, and it's kind of funny that I do what I do because you could break it down and take the words Lean as in a leaner physique and the arts of making people leaner.
I never thought about that. That's awesome.
So it's so if you can spell the last name Leenaarts, then you should be able to find just about everything on me.
Okay.
So yeah.
All right. And our closing question: what's your favorite cuss word?
It's the F word.
You got. I don't know the F word. Frank, Philly, fondle.
It's because it is a universal word. It is a noun. Is it a verb? It's a verb. It's everything. And I'm sure that if my mother listens to this, she will probably sit there and just shake her head and think, I know I raised my son better than this. My father, rest in peace. And I know he's looking down on me in heaven. He's probably like, Jason, it's not like you heard me say this word very often in your life, but I'm just of a certain generation. It's a very effective word. I just can't use it in all populations.
All right. Well, thanks for your time today and your wisdom. I appreciate it, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, buddy.
You have been listening to the Value Bridge podcast, a monthly 45 minutes or less of pithy, relevant, and helpful advice on everything business.